there are still goals and accomplishments and records and all that to be set. He has either gotten most of them or is pretty close to grabbing a lot of them. If you take a step back, how impressive has this journey been for Drew Brees?
And it's been one of the most impressive resumes that we'll ever see in pro sports, because the one thing about sports, especially from a professional standpoint, it's about size and speed and power. Like when you make it to the elite level at all levels, that being hockey, baseball, that being the NBA or the NFL, and especially the NFL. Like when I walk around the Hall of Fame, when I take Nick to introduce him to some of my friends and everything, Nick is forever always amazed at just even how the legendary players from years ago.
Even the guys from the 60s.
Just
These
how
are
big
dudes, man.
I mean, it's a big man's game. It's meant to be played by big people. And this guy has changed how people look at the game. Like, there's so many more quarterbacks that will get a chance to play because of Drew Brees in what he's doing as a quarterback. Russell Wilson tweeted something last night, to the effect of, looking up to Drew Brees and setting that example. And he did it not like Fran Tarkenton, because Fran Tarkenton did it a different way. He did throw the ball, but he ran around an awful lot, which also changed how you could play quarterback. But that opened the door for people like Michael Vick. Drew Brees opened the door for anyone. If you can throw the ball, and you can throw the ball, they'll make a spot for you. It's like a three-point shooter in the NBA. Man, the coach going to find a spot for you to get some minutes. And Drew Brees, what he's been able to do with height challenged, and I believe that's very, very important. And he plays the game as good as we've ever seen any quarterback play the game. And he played in an era where you can't just say, well, it was his offense. Well, they ran some type of run and shoot, or they ran some type of gimmick. No, they ran the same type of offense other teams ran. 3 receivers, 1 back, and here of recent, they've finally gotten a running game. But it's been on Drew Brees' shoulders. It's one of the great accomplishments that you will ever see, and the legacy that he will leave in pro football. About small guys can play this position and play at an elite level.
To stick with the size part of it, I'm not comparing it to any type of actual prejudice, but Warren Moon opened the door for a whole generation of quarterbacks. Yes. Guys to say, oh, black guys can play quarterback, right? That was real prejudice. Drew Brees opened the door to NFL talent evaluators saying, oh, wow, if you're not 6'2", I can't just cross you off my list. And that's why Russell Wilson has so much appreciation for him. That's why Baker Mayfield should have so much appreciation for him, whomever the next guy is, because listen, Doug Flutie existed, but Doug Flutie didn't excel at the highest levels. So you see a guy be one of the very best quarterbacks in football that doesn't have those measurables, and it makes other teams think, well, if he could do it, other guys could do it. Go ahead, C.
Yeah, and, Doug Flutie opened up the door for a certain type of quarterback. But Drew Brees, man, he opened it up that, like, no matter what your height is, no matter what your athleticism is, because you couldn't make an excuse for Doug Flutie not being on the field because he was a playmaker. But what it opened the door for Drew Brees, and Drew Brees for Russell, man, Baker Mayfield doesn't go to the #1 pick in the draft if Drew Brees and Russell Wilson aren't playing the type of football, because we don't have that example.
Exactly.
We as NFL and people been involved in the NFL, we love to be able to point out someone from previous history who looks like someone now so that we can kind of correlate what they're going to look like playing the game. What he's done with Sean Payton in New Orleans is tremendous, tremendous story. One of the greatest stories that we'll ever have in this great legacy what we have in the NFL.
And even if he were 6'5", his career would still be one of the most unlikely ever. His last year in San Diego, he was 24 touchdowns, 15 picks, an 89 rating. They were 9-7. He suffers a major injury. And that is then what propels him to New Orleans, teaming up with Sean Payton. Dante Stallworth told a great story yesterday about how meeting up with Drew Brees in the offseason and talking about potentially going to New Orleans, where Dante Stallworth already was. And Drew Brees knew all the receivers there, knew the types of routes they like to run, knew what system they already in place. And Dante, who was a good player in his own right, said, that's what made me realize what separated him from everybody else, that a team in a different conference that he hadn't even played with yet, he knew what I was doing and what my teammates were doing better than the guys who are already in the building.
You both mentioned Sean Payton. How important is it? These two have been together for 13 years. They have a Super Bowl together. How important was it for Drew Brees' confidence to also have a guy like Sean Payton say, hey, forget what you did. We understand the shoulder injury, all of it. We believe in you, and has built an offense for the last 13 years around him.
Jenna, you know how important it is for someone just to trust in who you are and what you can do. And Sean Payton in New Orleans, because Nick Saban told him no in Miami. The choice in Miami for Nick Saban was Dante Culpepper with a bad knee and Drew Brees coming from San Diego Chargers with a bad shoulder. And they were quoted in Miami as saying, never bet on a quarterback that's got a bad shoulder. Always go with the quarterback with the bad knee. And now we see what has happened. Both those careers went in opposite directions. So what Nick Saban and them, they actually did what I believe just was fate. It was meant for him to meet Sean Payton and get to New Orleans. 99% of all the players, great, as much talent as they have. And let's not, Drew Brees is a great athlete playing quarterback. He's just not Michael Vick. But all those athletes, I'm saying 99% of all the players ever played, they need a system. That system was the system Sean Payton created for Drew Brees. That's the reason why we were able to see the magic and see it last night with him going over the yardage mark, which was, I mean, it's unbelievable. I interviewed Drew Brees a couple weeks ago, and Drew Brees told me his first preseason game with the Chargers, he was in Miami. And he said, coming out the tunnel, he looked up there and he saw Dan Marino's, and he saw his numbers up there in the Ring of Honor. And he's just, wow, he couldn't believe that Dan had accomplished that. He couldn't even think to have himself in the same breath. So Drew Brees is truly amazed at what he's been able to accomplish in the NFL.
First in completions, first in completion percentage, first in yards, fourth in touchdowns, but he is going to finish first or second in touchdowns. He and Brady might volley that back and forth the next few years once they both finally pass Peyton Manning, probably midway through next season or late into next season, assuming they both play. But when you bring up Sean Payton, take the all-time quarterbacks list. Man, Montana had Walsh. Brady has Belichick. Peyton Manning had Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, and Tony Dungy. I know we don't look at Dungy as an offensive coach.
Tom Moore.
But Tom Moore and
yes.
Bill Polian picking the players.
Yes.
Brett Favre had Holmgren. I mean, go down the list. Staubach had Landry. Bradshaw had Knoll. Like, there's a reason that it's hard to find, think about this all-time great quarterback who had a bunch of different coaches and they stunk. Like, maybe there are some guys whose opportunity was missed. Maybe there's some guys
because they weren't
in the right place. Like, I think about the guy who replaced Drew Brees in San Diego, now Los Angeles, Phillip Rivers. Is there a different story to be told for Phillip Rivers' career with all the talent he has if he has a Sean Payton? I don't know. And is there a different story to be told if Drew Brees ends up going? Because the Brees Culpepper thing's noteworthy because up to that point, Dante Culpepper's the more accomplished player.
Yes.
Up to that point, Dante Culpepper seemed to be the safer bet. And now we look back on it and we think that's crazy, but that's where we were. And so it is as unlikely as Brady's story was as the 199th pick, Brees' story as a 6-foot guy who was on a second team who'd been injured, second round pick to have all these records, it's equally as
I mean, we thought Dante Culpepper, because who was Dante at that time? We thought he was the next era of quarterback.
Yes.
Because he was a pocket quarterback who could run a 4.5 and was 245. So he was that thing that we hadn't seen. We thought he was actually the future of quarterbacking, and we didn't know the guy that Nick Saban didn't want is actually the future of quarterbacking and playing it from the pocket.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.